And now to Joan.
All right, excellent. So good morning, everybody. I just want to talk very briefly about next steps associated with the Phase 1 ECE sector plans. We've been speaking with you from the beginning about how important it is going to be for the ECE sector plans to be able to be public facing. And I know that that's some of the conversations that Brett and Margie and Denise have been having with folks. So in addition to the full ECE sector plans, which we anticipate posting on our websites, we have decided that we also want to make sure that we have something slightly more compact to provide to all of our potential preschool promise applicants, in particular thinking about not wanting to overwhelm some of our smallest provider types that will be eligible to apply. And so we are going to be creating what we're calling at-a-glance summaries. And it is our intention to translate those summaries into Spanish. That is the only language that we're going to be translating into at this time. And we'll be working to prepare those at-a-glance summaries really from your ECE sector plans. We'll essentially be cutting and pasting out of the plans from deliverable 1 and deliverable 2 into those at-a-glance summaries. We anticipate that those will be either embedded within the RFA itself or in an appendix. We're not exactly sure where they're going to show up. But I do want everyone to be aware that's going to be happening. That makes the turnaround, of course, on the resubmission of some plans by some sites very important. So if we're going to need to make sure that we have all of our content on your ECE sector plans. Everybody's needs to be updated in as timely a fashion as possible, and certainly no later, absolutely no later than January 15th. And if we're able to have updated content prior to that, that will be very helpful for us as we move forward to create those summary documents. As we know more about exactly how everything's going to be publicly posted, we'll keep you abreast of that. But please do be thinking as you're refining and working on your plans, that your plans could be read by any citizen in your community. They could be read by legislators. They're certainly, in all likelihood, going to be looked at by Early Learning Council members and others, but just really think about that public-facing audience. And that is the spirit in which the feedback has been given to help to make sure that that can happen. So I don't know if there's any questions that people would like to ask about these at-a-glance summaries or Spanish translations. It's, I don't know how much more I have to share, but in essence, that's what our plan is.
Hey, Joan, it's Krista. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thanks. I'm just curious, when you guys get this, will the summary be like one for each hub region, or will it be like an overall summary? And will we have a chance to just kind of look at it and maybe offer feedback, or are you all just going to kind of keep it consistent across all the hubs? Any kind of process kinds of updates
Sure.
you could be helpful?
So there will be one at-a-glance summary for each hub. Our intention is it's no more than a back front. We will be literally cutting and pasting from your ECE sector plan, so you will know the content will be cutting and pasting is the content that you are providing. So at this point, we don't anticipate having you review those since you're already submitting your content to us. But once we have a final template for the at-a-glance summary, we can share the template with you so you know what that's looking like. And I imagine that will probably be end of this week, first of next week, we'll have that.
Hi, this is Gwen, and I just I had the opportunity to read through all of your sector plans, and I was just blown away. So I just wanted to thank all of you. It was really incredible and eye-opening, and I learned a lot about your community. So first, I just want to say thank you. And, it's been difficult to think about how do we, kind of narrow down like all that work and information that's in the whole plan into the at a glance. But really what we're looking at is the information around priority populations and then the family needs and preferences. So we're really looking at sort of those two tables as being kind of the information that would be in the at a glance. We really want to make sure that any applicants for any of our funding opportunities really know who the priority populations are and what those individuals said about their preferences.
All right.
Thanks to both of you. That's super helpful.
Hi, this is Adam. I have another quick follow-up question. Because I know I'm going to get questions about the Spanish translation. So at this point, the plan is to translate only the summaries, if I understand correctly. But what about the RFA itself? Will that also be available in Spanish?
Yes, the RFAs will be in Spanish for Preschool Promise.
Okay, but for OPK as well, or no?
Not for OPK.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
For OPK, entities that are eligible to apply for OPK funding typically are businesses that English is their operating language.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. More to come. If we have any updates on that, we'll provide those as we roll forward through the weeks ahead. So I'm going to now turn it over to Ann Morrison, who is going to talk to us about some hub-related projects that are in our initial PDG grant. This initial PDG grant ends at the end of February, and there are a few projects in there that we're still very excited about the opportunity to work on, and Ann is going to talk about those. And Ann, do you have some slides? Are we making you the presenter?
You certainly can. I have them up so I can share my screen if that's easiest.
That's what we're going to do, and you are now the presenter, Ann.
All right. Is that working? Can folks see?
Yep, we can see it.
All right, great. Thank you, Joan. So as Joan said, we are partnering with the School Readiness Consulting Group and SRI International to complete some projects in the initial PDG. You all will remember that in addition to our needs assessment and strategic plan, which were the bulk of our initial PDG work, the rest of the grant was really sort of a planning and sort of setting the groundwork for what we now know will be our renewal grants. We're very excited about that. And these projects are really intended to kind of help us plan for and transition into some of the projects that we'll be doing using our renewal grant funds, as well as help to enforce the work of the Student Success Act. And so the 4 projects that SRC and SRI will be working on are listed on this screen. The first is to meet our federal requirement of the grant that we connect our needs assessment work to the strategic plan. Given that we have Raise Up Oregon, it's an opportunity to kind of integrate what we've got in terms of collected data from the needs assessment into how we are talking about the implementation of Raise Up Oregon. The second is helping us to continue work on the use of data and continuing engagement for ECE sector planning. So this is really sort of a time for us to reflect and evaluate phase 1 and hear from you all, as well as sort of do some work with ELD about what resources would be helpful or sort of take a look at what would be useful for further planning work as we keep going on ECE sector planning. The third is to sort of do some work on coordinated enrollment. So SRC and SRI will be kind of looking nationally at trends around, coordinated enrollment in other states and localities, and also seeking to learn about what's occurring in Oregon right now to help inform our work moving forward with coordinated enrollment. And then finally, we are looking at how, an opportunity to document barriers, as well as opportunities in Oregon's blending and braiding of EI-ECSE funding with other funds, and to recommend some steps forward, or to take a look again at that landscape and see where we might be able to create opportunities for increased blending and braiding funding. So as you can see, with these projects, we expect that there will be opportunities and really invitations for you all to provide input and guidance around these projects. Specifically, I think this input will be really central when it comes to talking about our ECE sector planning, reflections, evaluations, and then resource creation, as well as a coordinated enrollment bulk of work. And so with that, SRC and SRI have identified specific folks. We have, as Joan mentioned, just till the end of February to get some work done. And so SRC and SRI have dedicated specific points of contact to each hub. You'll see they're kind of color-coded. The outlined color of each person's picture should correspond with the underlined color of the hub name on there. And we can share this out at the end. And I'll just switch to this third slide, and then I'll go back so you can take a look at your assigned person again. So again, between now and February 29th, SRC and SRI will be working with ELD and with hub directors to help us inform, create input, development materials, and plans for further movement on each of these projects. They are seeking to create multiple different ways to engage, such as interview requests, scheduling meetings, having opportunities for you all to review materials and provide input, and then we'll be helping to host the Learning Collaborative in February. Once we have more details about that, we'll be able to share. I did want to mention that since we are on somewhat of a quick timeline to get this work done, that you all may expect to hear directly from your point of contact here pretty soon, and that all of us at ELD, particularly those that you work with frequently, are a part of the ELD implementation team when it comes to these projects. We'll be kept up to date as well, so feel free to reach out to myself or other contacts with any questions you have. I'll switch back to this contact slide very quickly. See at the moment if there's any questions or comments I can help address at this time.
Hi, Anne, it's Joan. We had a question in the chat box if a little bit more could be said about the blended and braided funding project. So I'm wondering if either you or I know Gwen is here too, could just give a little bit more detail about that project.
Sure, Gwen, would you like to?
I was wondering about it. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so we, as you know, as Ann said, we don't have a lot of time, but here at the ELD, the program unit has been engaging with ODE and Kara Williams' team, and we're really looking at, I have a feeling, just so you know, this all kind of came soon, and we have to really make sure that the scope is appropriate for the timeline. But what we'll be looking at is sort of just current practices around what are some of the strategies and approaches that EI-ECSE providers have been using at the local community level to blend and braid to better support families and children receiving services. And then also it'll be looking at what are other states doing, and are there other approaches or models that we might want to think about as we move into this next fiscal year and the expansion of our services. So we recognize that this work, though, takes time. It takes collaboration, partnering, and so we're really just trying to sort of have come out of this with some sort of best or promising practices, like I said, both within our state and nationally, that we can evaluate and think about moving forward on in the future. Okay. Did that answer the question? Okay.
There's another one in the chat box.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the answer is yes, we'll definitely be working with the Children's Institute around some of the work
Yeah.
that they've already put together, so.
Yeah, any information that's already been captured and collated, is definitely something that we'll be looking at, like I said, due to our timeline.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on any of these projects at this time? Obviously, there's much more to come, and we'll be rolling that out again in the coming weeks. Okay. Well, then I think we're ready to transition to the update on the Preschool Promise program. And who's going to, do we want presenter to Dana?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think Dana has the slides.
Okay, 1 second. And there you go.
All right. Thanks, Dana. Right, so there have been a lot of questions that, as you know, have been coming into the FAQ that we have been sometimes only partially able to answer based on, our current decision-making. But we're really trying to make sure that as soon as we do have decisions that have been made, that we're informing you and updating the FAQ. There are a lot of moving parts, and so I just really appreciate all of your patience as we try to figure out sort of the best way to move forward with the expansion with all the sort of complexities that it presents to us. So the first update is around the fiscal agent role, and we have developed an RFA that is ready for DOJ review. And just to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page, as probably the Oregon legislature passed House Bill 2025, which authorizes the ELD to identify and approve entities as fiscal agents who will provide services to multiple Preschool Promise providers. Preschool Promise program providers have the option of entering into an agreement with an ELD-approved fiscal agent, and through that agreement, the fiscal agent would assist them in many of the business and administrative functions pursuant of the Preschool Promise program. But I just want to emphasize that it is a choice of a provider to enter into an agreement to utilize a fiscal agent. So an ELD-approved fiscal agent will receive, through grant with the ELD, a percentage of a Preschool Promise provider's grant. So in a sense, the provider is authorizing the ELD to, in a sense, like hold back some of their allocation that would be redistributed to the fiscal agent in support of the services that the fiscal agent would be providing. The percentage of that reallocation of that funding would be determined by the ELD, and it'll be a competitive application process. And fiscal agents will not know at point of application which providers might be assigned to them. So I think I really want to make that point clear, because I think that there was, as we were trying to figure this out and work through this, that was sort of one of the challenges that the ELD had to kind of work through is, when is the arranged marriage finalized? And I think there was a sense that fiscal agents would be applying sort of with a list of providers or somehow applying on behalf of providers, but due to the application process for Preschool Promise providers being competitive, sort of like that process has to be its own process. We determine who the providers are, and then whether those providers would like to access a fiscal agent, and then the ELD would be kind of like creating those partnerships between the fiscal agent and the providers in their community. So that's what we know to date. All right. In regard to the program quality and technical assistance, As you are all aware, the current Preschool Promise hubs have coordinated through either subcontracts or directly providing support to TA for providers. And currently, we're still in the process of determining what is the most appropriate approach to securing the necessary TA when we expand services and add a couple hundred more providers to the system. So more to come once final decisions have been made. We have a meeting this week internally that we're hoping will sort of get us further along in some decisions there. So more to come on that. We appreciate your patience. And then the last three items that were sort of on the agenda around recruitment, eligibility, and placement. That's, as Anne mentioned, we are working with our contractor to look at what is sort of what's happening nationally and also in state around approaches to coordinating enrollment. That's going to help us determine sort of our long-term vision for what coordinating enrollment will look like in our state. But Dana and I are sitting right next to each other here, know that we have an immediate need for some support and help as we expand services that have to do with recruitment of families, determining eligibility, selection and placement of those families into Preschool Promise services, and that's all going to have to happen between now and next September. So some of our first phase of coordinating enrollment will be working with all of you on those pieces. SSA Early Investment Account does have resources for coordinating enrollment, and so in this next fiscal year, we're going to be developing a scope of work around, like I said, recruitment, eligibility, selection, placement that'll utilize those funds that have been authorized for SSA. So more to come on that. I'm kind of on a roll here. Okay, keep going.
Or should we pause?
Pause there and then go.
Pause? Yeah.
There is a question in
There's,
the chat.
I'm sure.
Okay.
Do you see that question going in the chat
Let
box?
me see here. Yeah. Dana, do you want, it's around
Yeah.
financial and administrative services. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and this is Dana Yun here. One thing that we, with the fiscal agent, and thank you to all of you. I also have a chance to go ahead and review some of those sector plans, and a lot of you actually may know to the fiscal agent and the importance of business acumen and helping our small providers with administration. So really, the fiscal agent is very focused on business acumen, helping small businesses and providers, submit their fiscal reports, their budgets, one thing that I was able to go ahead and note across the state is that you all see that as an opportunity. So what a great way to go ahead and be able to provide this to our providers than through this fiscal agent RFA. So it's very focused on just business acumen, reporting, being able to go ahead and also be a support to that provider when doing a grant or a contract with the state. So definitely we know there's some benefits to having some of that support, like when they're trying to go ahead and get some payroll services, how do I hire? Many of our providers, this is going to be their first time hiring. So making sure that they have that support with hiring, HR practices, benefits, and so on. So it's very business oriented to ensuring that the success of those businesses.
Dana, you see there's another follow-up to this.
Another follow-up,
Yeah.
yeah.
From Annette.
Yes,
More.
the
Yep.
the fiscal agent RFA is on the same timeline, Annette. We have to have all of these RFAs on the same timeline so that funds can be, so we can enter into fully executed contracts July 1st. So it'll be all on the same timeline, yeah.
And there's one more about, will we know what other entities in our region will be applying to be fiscal agents? No.
Unless you're talking to each other.
And like Joan said, unless you're aware at the community level, but we might not know until the applications come in who's applying. And I think it's going to be a decision for all of you whether you want to consider yourselves as potentially an applicant or if you want to be trying to think about who in your community might be a good fiscal agent and sort of encouraging them to apply.
We
have another question. Will coordinated enrollment only be for Preschool Promise, or will other programs be a part of coordinated enrollment?
So I think thank you. This is a great question, and we've been kind of, going back and forth on this. The primary function for this upcoming program year will be in support of Preschool Promise. If you're a hub that already has some really strong relationships, or maybe I know some of our current Preschool Promise hubs have some really strong like memorandums of understanding or interagency agreements with their local Head Starts or other partners. Of course, you can continue on with that. We wouldn't be restricting that, but I think we're recognizing that it takes time to build those relationships and partnerships with some of our other providers in the community, and that we might not have enough time this year to get that all done, but it might be part of our long-term vision. But I think with our Head Start partners, that'll also be experiencing expansion of services. It might be just a tough year for us to coordinate it all. So it'll be definitely required for Preschool Promise. There's already existing relationships, we can continue with that, but there won't be a requirement to, in a sense, be determining eligibility and placement for Head Start in your community on the hub.
It looks like we have another question. If there aren't any fiscal agents in our region, so I'm assuming that means if no one in the region actually applies to be a fiscal agent, will the ELD provide those business TA assistance to providers that need it?
Let's hold on that question.
Yeah.
We really I appreciate that. That's a good one for us to think through. But I think, let's hold on that.
Yeah.
There's one more down there.
All right.
Oh, there's a couple more.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to follow them too.
The next one is, if hubs are not a fiscal agent, will we have a role in TA with Preschool Promise programs moving forward? Yeah, they just look like two separate questions.
Sorry, I'm trying to find that one.
Two from the bottom.
Okay.
So what I'm hoping people are hearing is that the fiscal agent role has been separated from the TA role. So just to state at the onset, as Gwen was talking, you should have heard there's an RFA for fiscal agents. There is still work underway to make a determination about how Preschool Promise is going to approach getting access to sufficient TA for program quality, but those are two separate processes that are going. So this question then, if we could go back to that, yeah.
Right.
If hubs are not a fiscal agent, will we have a role in TA?
And I think, as I mentioned, we're still kind of working out all those details. And figuring out which entities and, will be doing what in support of quality programming locally.
Okay. So just to reiterate, Krista's asking, are there two RFA processes then? One for Preschool Promise implementation and one for fiscal agents? And I believe the answer is yes. There will be two separate RFA processes. Yes.
Correct. Right, one for providers and one for fiscal agents, and yet to be determined would be for the technical assistance support around quality standards.
And then we have another question about how multiple fiscal agents will be connected, but I'm not clear on what that exactly means. So I don't know, Lisa, might you unmute and tell us what you're thinking when you ask that question, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Joan. I appreciate it. So the question is, if there are multiple fiscal agents in a region, how will those fiscal agents be working together or coordinating amongst themselves with the various providers? So that was the intention behind that question. And then I was just typing another question that is sort of related, is it the divisions, and I know that you don't know yet because you don't know how many people would potentially be applying, but is there a desire on the division's behalf to have multiple fiscal agents, or is the desire to have one fiscal agent in a region?
Thanks, Lisa. This is Gwen. I guess my response would be yes, and in some ways. I mean, I hate to be so open and vague about that, but I think what we're really trying to do is ensure that the providers who are selected to be preschool promise providers and have then asked to also have a fiscal agent, that we have an appropriate fiscal agent to meet the provider's needs. So if we have providers that, I'll just use one group, like if we have a large number of Spanish-speaking providers in one community that are requesting a fiscal agent, then we're going to try to, make sure that they're matched up with a fiscal agent who has the language abilities to best support that group of providers. So it potentially, there could be more than one fiscal agent in a community because the providers might have different needs. So we're really trying to meet the provider's needs instead of making the providers fit into kind of like the box that a fiscal agent might present. So I hope that helped answer it. And so potentially there could be a fiscal agent that is servicing or providing services to providers in different hub communities. It just would depend upon that fiscal agent's sort of skill set and ability to meet the needs of those providers.
And I was just going to say, have you thought at all about Lisa's question about connecting fiscal agents? Are you imagining some kind of connection between them? Wasn't sure if you know that yet.
Yeah. One thing I can say, how that happens locally, I think that would be to be determined. But as at the ELD, since we will be contracting with the fiscal agent, we would be having sort of a professional cohort, of fiscal agents that we would be bringing together, to make sure that all the fiscal agents are aware of, kind of the scope of work, what's required of their grant, and so they would have sort of that peer group themselves. But then how it might look on the ground locally, I think, would be determined later.
This is Dana here. I just want to, just want to go ahead and really reiterate, this is really a small business decision. We're really trying to let the providers decide whether they need a fiscal agent or not, just to not be confused with like the previous implementation, how both of the RFAs are going to be launched at the same time. We're looking to go ahead and see who are these entities across the state that could be a high quality fiscal agent based on those business acumen and business operational needs. But ultimately, it will be up to the provider, because we want to be responsive and respectful to that provider, that they may already have some fiscal process and procedures established. I just want to go ahead and emphasize that it's a different type of implementation than it was before.
And I think that answered Krista's two questions. Yes, Krista, you're accurate that all providers would be receiving technical assistance around for the service quality standards, but then not all providers would necessarily be using a fiscal agent. That would be, as Dana said, sort of their decision.
Can I ask a follow-up about that?
Please go ahead.
So is it possible then that as a provider, you might need some kind of services that a fiscal agent would be able to provide, but not other kinds? So you can opt in to there's like a service menu essentially that as a fiscal agent, if you're approved by the ELD, you can offer X, Y, and Z. But providers only need X, they don't need Y and Z. Is that going to be an option? And then does that then determine how the ELD would identify the percentage that would come off of that provider's contract for the fiscal agent?
I guess I'd like to say we're trying to only offer the services that a provider would want to access, right? We really want to recognize that a lot of our small businesses, they have a lot of these skills. Some of them might be developing these skills, but that the percentage that would be held back, we think would be held constant, right? So I think that answers it, but I'm going to keep that as a good question, because in a sense, you know, we're sort of acting a little bit as a intermediary in a sense between a business owner who wants to seek a service and the service that they're seeking. And so we want to make sure that all of our processes are really respectful of the business owner, but also that it generates enough of a resource and revenue that is viable also for the fiscal agent.
And it looks like we have one more question from Adam, and then I think we'll try to move on to the rest of what you have to share.
Okay, let's see. Adam, it's a good question. Yeah, we're not sure, right, because since the processes have to happen at the same time, the ELD might approve, like we're looking at these as kind of the terminology is an ELD approved for fiscal agent. So the application of a fiscal agent coming in will be that the ELD is sort of saying you're an approved fiscal agent, and then if there's providers in your community who want to seek fiscal agent services, then we would connect. But if there's no providers in a community that want those services, then it might be a no grant or a very minimal grant.
Okay, great. Okay, other information you all would like to share beyond this? I know you have other slides.
Can I,
Yes,
sorry,
I'm fine.
Can I ask a really quick follow-up question? So is there a section on the RFA that indicates if a provider wants to work with a fiscal agent? Is that what you're saying? So that's how you'll know if they want to work with someone?
Yes. Okay, so what about timelines?
All right. So I think this might be a similar slide to what you've seen before, but just wanted to make sure. It's always good to see things a couple times, or we might have some confirmed dates, but I think we're moving right along with all these timelines. And so as you can see, we're sector planning October through December. I know it's into January a little bit here, but they were all submitted by December, and now we've been engaging with stakeholder engagement, and Daniel will be talking more about that, I think, in the after call, right? Yeah. But we are engaging on a variety of topics, and I just want to mention to all of you that, as you can tell, there's a lot of different moving parts that have very specific functions, or roles in the implementation and expansion, and so so you might hear that there's a stakeholder engagement, but it might be just like a really small group of stakeholders that we're trying to engage in, because it's really just around a certain function of the implementation or a certain role. So we will, like I said, our stakeholder engagement plan is kind of a work in progress, but we do have some defined dates that can be shared with you. And then we are on track for an application to be released at the end of January. We are set for as soon as the rules are promulgated and adopted by the ELC on January 30th to go ahead and release the application. And there will be the Preschool Promise application, the OPK and Early Head Start application, the fiscal agent application, and the equity fund application that are all scheduled to be released pretty much on that same day. At this point, that's the 4 that I'm aware of. And then we have the rules are being updated, and I have a more detailed timeline for the rules, but then the applications will be due in March, and I guess I should have updated this with some dates, but I think we're kind of, we have to have it open for a certain amount of time after it's released, so we just need to make sure that, I think it was April 2nd, right? It was kind of the end. So I'll do an update on that. And then the awardees would be notified in April, and then the grant's executed in June so that services can begin in the fall. We do have a high expectation from the legislature that Preschool Promise services and our equity fund services all start, and the OPK, all of these services will start by September, at least by the end of September. So next slide, and then we'll go on. So since we last talked, we do have some dates confirmed for rulemaking. So as you know, the notice of rulemaking went to Secretary of State on December, I think, 11th or 12th, I think it was the 12th. And the public comment period has begun. It's open now. And if you'd like to provide feedback, you can send it directly to Remy Watts, or you can use the link that we sent out on the sneak peek. The only thing I'll mention about that is between when we gave you kind of the sneak peek and the SurveyMonkey form to send us information, we did make some changes to the rules before we sent them to the Secretary of State. So not all of the categories should line up fine with the SurveyMonkey, not the SurveyMonkey, I'm sorry, it's the Smartsheet survey. But if for some reason you think that it'd be better just to send an email to Remy, you can do that. So both ways are fine. And then we'll have the public hearing for OPK and Preschool Promise on January 21st. And then the public comment period will close on the 22nd. And then we have a pretty quick turnaround to incorporate public comment before the rules are adopted on January 30th. And there had been a question sent in by a director about the comments that have already been sent in and how, you know, on the input that was collected, how will that be considered? And like I said, thank you for those of you who did submit some thoughts and comments. We were able to use some of those, you know, that you're thinking before we submitted to Secretary of State. But all of those comments that you've already submitted, we will be just putting together with all the other public comment that we received. So it's still all in the mix.
Next slide.
And that's
it. All right.
Were there any questions?
Any other questions on anything that Gwen and and Dana have shared at this point in time? You can either unmute and ask, or you can put your question in the chat box.
Hey, this is Molly. We would love to know when we would have some idea about how many slots we're talking about. It's hard to figure out how to activate, how much of our community to activate if they're going to be just a few slots, that sort of question. Any idea?
Yeah, so we are working on what we're calling a saturation plan to really look at, you know, what is the level of service that's already in a community, and then, you know, so what communities, you know, have kind of a higher percentage of families, eligible families and children being served already. And our goal is to have that saturation plan kind of finalized in-house by the end of the week, and that it'll be ready to go when the RFA is released. But I appreciate the comment, Molly, and I'll think about what would be the appropriate, if it's released sooner to community, when that would be and what the mechanism for that would be. So I'll make a note of that.
Thank you.
One other comment about the rules. So I wanted to send out to you before the winter break. I know many of you are going on a winter break, or they had a shutdown. The new rules that we did send to the Secretary of State, but I thought it might be good to, since we were talking about it today, that we will follow up. I just want to make sure that everybody has the most current copy that is available for public comment, because the one that we had sent you before the sneak peek, like I said, is sort of an old draft at this point. So we'll make sure that we send you both rule sets. And should we attach the equity one as well?
I think that we should.
So we'll send you all three rule sets. So it'll be OPK, Preschool Promise, and the equity rule set for you to review.
Just to answer Renee's question about the TA sessions regarding the RFA, great question. So we'll be working on that internally this week. We have some of the dates, but also who's going to be helping out in communities. Some of our entities complete the RFA. We know there's been a lot of hub interest on helping our providers, like helping with us. So more to come on that, on what are the resources available in community to help with that.
I think we had one other question. Oh, there's a question around the data. For the saturation plans, what data is being utilized to determine saturation?
Hey everyone, this is Sarah. I joined a little bit ago. So the data that's being used for the plan that will be released when we put those numbers out, and we will try to get them out earlier than the RFA release date, is just the number of slots currently within the community that we fund or that the federal government funds through OPK. But for Preschool Promise, we're just using Preschool Promise data compared to the number of children at the eligibility levels and looking at trying to get to more equitable saturation by community. So it's really just a comparison of the families living at 200% of federal poverty level or below and the current allocation of Preschool Promise slots compared to the new allocation of Preschool Promise slots.
Okay. We have a question regarding whether or not the hubs will have an official role in helping inform the public about RFAs, hosting info sessions, et cetera.
I think to be determined, I think the reason I'm saying, I'm kind of saying no is this has been one area that's been a little bit, it had to go back and forth here is because hubs actually are potential applicants for a couple of the RFAs, it sort of gets tricky on what your role in community and is, could present a conflict of interest. So we're trying to be really sensitive to that for you and other providers in your community. So, but I think more to come. But at this point, we're just really trying to be respectful of your ability to apply and not confusing that role.
All right. Looks like we have one more question. Elisa is saying thank you for clarification on the data that we use for the saturation plans. She wants to know whether or not this will be the corrected data. We had some discrepancy with some of the data provided for the sector plans.
I guess I'd be curious, Lisa, if you can share more, because the data we're using is ACS data, American Community Survey data, versus our numbers on how many slots we put into each hub. So I'm not sure if there's a further concern on either of those.
So Lisa, I think if you want to follow up by email, you could copy Sarah, Denise, and I, and we could carry that off online. But I think we feel pretty good about the data that we're using for the saturation plan, given the sources of it. So, okay. Any other questions on anything that has been shared about the Preschool Promise, fiscal agent role, RFAs, rules, timelines? We might have one more question. Molly is saying that we have a lot of questions coming to us from providers, school districts, et cetera, and are holding a community meeting to share what they know. Is that okay?
I guess this is Sarah again. I would say that's totally fine. I think to Gwen's point, as the sort of folks putting out the opportunity at the state, we cannot, in some instances, ask you to do things. It doesn't mean that you're precluded from doing things. It's just that we're not sort of tasking you with a specific role. It's more of that is a role you choose to take within your community.
Any other questions? All right, then I am going to transition us to Sarah. Yay! To talk to us just a little bit about the preschool development grant. I know we had a lot of interest. People are very excited, and some questions that we got ahead of time around getting a copy of the reference needs assessment, and then how we think that the any other related information that you're feeling like you want to share at this time related to the grant.
Sure, absolutely. Happy New Year, everyone. I know I already jumped in ahead of time, but wanted to to say that, so it feels like the same as the last year, given the news cycle, but happy 2020. So we, as you received an announcement, and we haven't really gotten any more information since they sent out the announcement, we were one of 20 states out of 48 chosen. There's my, I just have to say that always. What's competitive? To receive a preschool development grant renewal grant by the Administration for Children and Families at the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. We applied for and were eligible to apply for about 10 million per year, and we received about 9 million per year is still the number that we believe to be true for the next 3 years. So around $27 million for 3 years. So I'll start with the first question, which was around the needs assessment referenced in the grant. So as you all know, and Ann talked about earlier, we had an initial 1-year grant, which required us to do a needs assessment and an updated strategic plan, as well as some other activities. So as you might have seen in the grant application, that we, at the time we applied, had not yet submitted our needs assessment to the Administration for Children and Families, who part of the grant requires that they approve it based off of their sort of requirements, and we have not received their feedback on the needs assessment yet. So just from a version control, because we may have to make changes, we don't know how significant the changes will be. We haven't published that or put it out. We don't really plan to share much from it for probably a month or two more, depending on what the feedback will be. So we'll definitely share it with you all at that time, but I think it is not complete, and part of the grant requirement was that we were making good progress, but not necessarily that it was complete. So the reference needs assessment, I guess, just to answer that question, is not finished. So we have not shared it, but we'll be sharing it when it is done. So I'll pause there to see if there's any other follow-up on that, and then I'll just talk a little bit about the grant opportunity itself, next steps, timing, and any effects it might have on your work immediately. Okay, well, hearing no immediate follow-up, I'll just keep going. So, as I said, we haven't received... I'll take that as a rousing cheer from the crowd. Yeah, exactly. So we haven't received further direction on the approximately $1 million a year that we have to cut from our grant. So, for example, why that sort of matters is last time we were in a similar situation and were given direction by the feds that we couldn't cut from certain projects and we could only cut from others. So that's why I'm a little, I give that caveat with all of this, because something different about this grant was that we were able to expand services. And so, if they were to come and say, you couldn't cut any of the services you wanted to expand, that would mean something very different than if they said you could just cut from wherever in the grant that you want to. So that's my caveat starting this. So I know you all received the grant itself and the grant summary. I think we'll be working to do more on kind of explaining more of what's in the grant. Is there a question in the chat that's relevant?
Lisa said, did we just end the call, or is there a technical issue? So sorry, Sarah, I just wanted to
we're on air.
Make sure that.
Have we lost people?
I can still hear.
Yeah.
Okay.
And can Lisa still hear?
We're getting people saying in the chat box they can hear. I'll ask Lisa.
Okay.
Well, I'll just keep going,
Okay.
and we can catch anyone else up later, and I'll try to speed up a little bit here, because I know that you're probably not going to retain a bunch of stuff that I just say to you, and maybe your first day like mine, back to work in the new year. So I think some highlights here, particular to your work, if we put more resources here for hubs in a few different places. Again, I say this all with the caveat of we have to cut $1 million, so we would like to retain these things because they're really important to us. But I would say everything we put in here was really important to us. Again, we tried to do this work with an eye on our strategic plan and what we were already planning to do, and where we've heard energy from you all, from CCR&Rs, from communities where we know there's a need. So although, you know, we always say we're fortunate to have the SSA resources, the Student Success Act resources, it is a down payment, and this grant is a lot about building the infrastructure around that to continue to build our early learning system in ways that we did not have resources to do otherwise outside of this grant, or expanding services in ways that we thought were helpful. So that includes supporting you all to develop coordinated enrollment systems, so continued resources to do so. So what, again, I think now that we have the money, we'll kind of, what that was imagined to be was really capacity and FTE for hubs to do the work, in addition, kind of on top of the resources within the Student Success Act. And some work, we know that many of you already do work with parents that have formalized parent councils in different ways, and so learning from that, and also expanding that ability for hubs to work with families in the governance sort of way, as well as to support the Early Learning Council in involving families and parents in subcommittees in a more meaningful way, so meaning resources to actually train families and parents to participate in those sort of environments, so this specific to the council, providing stipends and other resources to work with subcommittees, and that's true of working with you all too, but of course that will be something designed in concert with you all when it comes to the work of hubs. I think as specific of money that would come directly to hubs, those are sort of the two resources. There's a lot within the grant around really transforming the way we work with families, I would say, and the way that the type of information we provide, so work around really making a more modernized platform for families to find childcare with all of the information sort of in one place. There's a lot of resources in here, which we're very excited about, to really look at Spark again, and to have resources to speed up that revision process and make really a system that Oregon needs to both build the supply of high quality childcare and support providers in engaging in continuous quality improvement practices. There's a lot in here around competencies and professional learning in general, which we're really excited about. I won't go into all of that. I know one key issue that comes up again, and so I think through this and both the professional learning plan we'll be submitting to the legislature in the next few weeks, there's resources to really look at the Oregon Registry Online and think about the career set pathway, as well as the system itself and the way that really counts professional learning, and thinking about that with an equity lens. I will just do a few more highlights and then stop for questions. So we would be able to do things, and the expansion of services would include expanding Baby Promise to tribal communities as well as rural communities. So the way we imagine that was really thinking about in concert with, as far as rural communities go, knowing that we rely a lot on home-based environments, or that, that is the supply in a lot of communities, and that's a great place to offer preschool, but we know the unintended consequence can be not taking babies or toddlers as a result of doing that. So this is really an attempt to see if providing public funding for infants and toddlers and preschoolers at the higher cost of quality, along with quality standards, kind of testing how that can build supply and maintain supply in rural communities. So we also put in funding to do some matching to K-12 investments. There's been a lot of energy around that. I know we've talked about that a lot in preschool. So really some matching preschool promise dollars for K-12, with the theory of change really there, saying a lot of what we've heard from our K-12 partners, you may have heard this too, is we want to do preschool, but it's too expensive. So that's, the answer is definitely not doing it on the cheap. So it's thinking about how we can partner with these resources for 3 years with districts having a plan to kind of then take on that match and offer a preschool. So that's, in all of these things are things we thought were amazing ideas that we still think are amazing ideas, but just found out a few days before we all left for break. So I know there's probably a lot of implementation questions, and we're still, I think, over the next few weeks going to be mulling over those, thinking about implications for the request for applications, communications, sort of all of that. I will say I don't anticipate, given the amount of work you just heard Dana and Gwen talk about of what's coming out, is that we'll probably talk about whether the Baby Promise resources kind of come out at the same time. Probably not, probably a little bit later. So anyway, that's some highlights there. Just to pick out one more, I think that, or two more, is some of the work we'll be laying the groundwork to do to expand services is really looking at infant and preschool, early childhood mental health consultation supports that exist and thinking about how those could be expanded. We know that that's a huge need across the state, as well as things that some of you in your communities have really been champions on and have been doing some great work on, as well as, just for especially our Central Oregon hub, we did put in some dollars to think about looking at the Child Care Accelerator strategy and how that could work in other communities. So we'll be in touch on that very soon, and then really laying the groundwork to partner with Oregon Housing and Community Services, who have been really interested in working with us to partner to put child care within affordable housing units, and looking at this year really just kind of doing a landscape analysis of where that happens across the country, and starting that partnership to think about how we could place early Head Start slots in particular in those communities. So I will actually stop talking there, see if folks have questions, and then I'll kind of go over the expected implementation timeline.
Any questions for Sarah on anything that she shared?
Oh, there's a question from Beth.
So the renewal grant starts whenever I can log into Grant Solutions, but this month we should receive the funding this month. So it's a 1-year grant. The grant year is January to January.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to always have a 2-week heads up when you have to do something different. So see, you're not the only one.
Do you want to talk anything else about implementation? Any other details?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few positions we'll be hiring for, which we're really excited about. We have put a tribal liaison, a position into the grant, so that's something we're really excited about, to work together with our really equity team on my team to think about how we continue to establish better partnerships and that meet the needs of our federally recognized tribes. We have some work around the early learning guidelines in there, so it's a position really focused on that. And just a few others, like coordinated enrollment, that's the one you're like, I'll just not skip the one you're probably most interested in. So it's a person here at ELD dedicated specifically to the coordinated enrollment work. So yeah, that's exciting. So implementation will be as fast as we can go. The expansion of services would happen sort of starting on the same timeline. We said we would start these services in September. Baby Promise probably a little bit later. I think it does give us some additional startup resources for those as well. So overall, exciting, but we just know that it's now the procurement puzzle of getting the money out the door. But we're very fortunate to have this. It gives us a lot of some room to do things that I think will be really necessary to make this work happen at both the system level and the child and classroom level.
We do have just one question from Lisa about whether or not hubs will have a chance to talk and further discuss the implementation of the grant.
Yeah, I mean, so what I would say is that the ideal implementation of the grant would really be woven into our work in general. So I would say yes, and it will, I think, be more project by project implementation here. So the first year grant really was sort of a self-contained effort, or so it kind of felt like. I think with this 3-year grant, we're able to kind of interweave this into our work to improve our professional learning system, our work with youth. So yes, as I think we develop the work plans and the scope of work for the grant, we will definitely update you as as relevant and as quickly as we possibly can on a lot of this. But hopefully it will kind of be a little bit of a transparent and seamless sort of integration into our work in general. So.
Yeah. And I would just add to that, Sarah said,
Yeah,
what I heard earlier from Sarah is that as soon as we get sort of the direction from the feds on where, you know, if there's any direction as to where we would need to cut or where we can't cut or this and that I think we'll be coming back with a finalized version of the project and the scope of work for each of those projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we can
That'll
have,
probably be the next.
yeah, that's what I think people should anticipate as the next thing. And then obviously, as Sarah said, as the projects are related to work we're already doing together, they would begin to be integrated into that work.
Yeah.
So. All right. I'm going to thank everybody for coming and participating today. I know Denise has got a couple just quick things before we close out the call.
So, and we're right on time, hurrah. So, just one, first thing you see on the agenda is we want to move this call to be better aligned with our webinar, which is the third Tuesday of the month. So we're going to move this call as well to the first Tuesday of the month instead of the first Monday. I don't know if we decided on morning or afternoon for that yet. I think we'll probably stick with the same time if this works. I can, if there's folks that have really a specific issue with 9:30 to 10:45 on the first Tuesdays that would begin on February 4th, please let me know. We could look at doing the afternoon as well. So that's the first piece. Also, do you want to say something about that? Okay, the Learning Collaborative. Yes, the Learning Collaborative is coming up February 25th and 26th. Mark your calendars. I will send a calendar invite. We have secured a location at the Lynn Benton Community College in Albany, and we've done this in concert with our school readiness consultants because they will be doing a big part of the Learning Collaborative. The agenda will be focused on working with them on the coordinated enrollment work, as well as doing some of the phase 1 feedback work for the ECE planning process as well. So more to come, but I will send you calendar invites. We haven't figured out, will there be a Monday evening? Will CCR&Rs come? All of that to come here in the next week or so. So more information forthcoming on that piece as well. And then a couple other housekeeping pieces. I know folks have been concerned because of those lovely auto messages we get from EGUMS every time dollars are expiring, and not to worry, all of those dollars will roll forward in the updated contract that will be coming out in February. So the concerns that you had about money for July through September, as well as the dollars in this shortened contract, will all roll forward to be used by the end of this biennium. So I hope that answers that question. You can email me offline if you have other concerns. And then, of course, I know everyone is anxiously awaiting the templates for quarterly reporting and work planning, and those will also be out this week. So we're just finalizing those pieces as well. Not to see big changes. Really, the work plan one is to be in line with Raise Up Oregon and take out some of that extraneous pieces around hub indicators. And the quarterly report template will also be we're trying to simplify as well, add the ECE planning piece, and KPI will stay in that reporting template as well. Brett and I have discussed that. So that will come to you this week. I know people are waiting to get that out to your subcontractors. So we can talk about anything offline. And then there's a question about the governance leadership. A great question, since we were really focused on that for what was supposed to be our November collaborative. I think it's likely to be put off until the spring collaborative because of the necessity to spend so much time on our short timeline with coordinated enrollment and what that looks like, both for preschool promise expansion and beyond. So I'm going to say no, and I'm getting affirmation from Joan as well. So governance to come at the probably May Learning Collaborative, so more about that in February as well. So as we know more, we will send that out to you all this week. Oh, yeah. Oh, and Sarah?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot, that's, mention a few legislative sort of relevant things that I wanted to throw into my update to you all. So legislative days, January legislative days are next week. We'll be presenting to both the Senate Education and I believe the House Education committees on Monday and Wednesday, respectively, about the Student Success. It's just a short update on the Student Success Act implementation. We'll be presenting our professional learning plan in February during the session. And I know that, so you all are aware, we had 3 sort of big reports due, either directed through budget notes or other sort of budgetary mandates. So the $12.5 million annually for professional learning that was part of the early learning account in the Student Success Act. We'll be putting out our plan for that in the next week and a half or so. So you should expect to see that. The second was a note to have us investigate co-pays for current families in Preschool Promise. So we will be submitting a report with a recommendation to not collect co-pays for Preschool Promise. Shocking, maybe to all, but so that will be going in. And then the third report was around child care resource and referral entities and hubs, and that you're all familiar with. So, so what we'll be doing in next week or so is submitting a preliminary, really descriptive report about what hubs and CCR&Rs are, because as you know, that is known to the legislature in some ways, but looking at your budgets, kind of doing comparison and all that sort of stuff. So all we'll be submitting as of now is really a descriptive report that includes recommendations for further research questions. We really told the legislature, given all of the implementation things going on right now with the Success Act, to try to due diligence to completing that, report and really digging in and thinking about roles and providing recommendations is not something that we feel is the best for the early learning system at this time, nor is it something we feel that we were able to do. So what we'll be doing is really recommending research questions, getting feedback on kind of the questions that we'll be investigating, and doing a much more robust version of that report, likely for around the end of this year, depending on kind of what the legislature says. That would include actual engagement of you all and other stakeholders. So just so didn't want to leave the call without mentioning that. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time and attention and questions, and look forward to our ongoing work and communications together. So take care.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye. Preschool Promise.
Bye, thank you.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so Preschool Promise subdirectors, please stay on for Dana, and we're going to keep the GoToMeeting going. I'm going to turn over the presentership to you. And we'll keep recording as well. Just 1 minute for cleanup, folks. Okay. All right, there you go, Dana.
Alrighty, well, thank you, and Gwen's gonna be staying with us, so for a little bit, but this, meeting shouldn't take that long, it's just a really quick recap of some of the communication that you guys may have seen. I do wanna be super respectful of you, all of you guys' time, so if we can just go ahead and make a decision, what we need to decide is whether you want to continue doing this 30 minutes at the end of the regular Hub Directors call, or do you just want to move this meeting to the regular second Thursday of the month and have it be a directors and coordinators type of meeting? So go ahead and go down that, and we'll just take a quick vote. You're just going to say, keep it at the end of the call or move it to the second Thursday. So we'll start with Clackamas. Annette, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm okay with it being at this time. I just like a calendar appointment for it because I just can't remember that it's happening.
Okay, perfect. So keep it for January. What about Eastern Oregon?
But tell me again, it's either now or what day? So it'll be the second Tuesday?
No, it will be the second Thursday of the month, along with the preschool premise coordinators. And one thing I should add is that as we continue our time together, we're going to be talking about preschool promise most of the time during the directors meeting. That's why it kind of gets a little odd sometimes, because we're already talking about preschool promise during the directors call meeting. So that's still going to continue. Gwen and I will still be part of the Hub directors call.
Yeah, if I could add in maybe just a little, I know we're switching gears quick. The reason that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dana, but my understanding is that the reason that we established this half hour after the director's call was that some of the information that Dana and I were sharing on the coordinator's call was information that you all wanted before we shared with coordinators, so that you sort of respecting your role as the director, of your program. And so instead of maybe information flowing from the coordinator to you, that you had the opportunity to receive that information first. And then Dana and I were meeting with the coordinators, and sometimes it was reiterative, it was a reiteration of what we shared with you, but it was really with the coordinators on how they would then kind of implement that information in their role. So I think, and so what we're asking now is it still effective to do it this way, or would you like to join the second Thursday call with your coordinators?
Right.
Did I get that? Yep.
So this is Kelly in Eastern Oregon, and I'm looking at my calendar, and I just, in 10 minutes on the first Tuesday of the month that we're moving to, well, anyway, it's a conflict. I can't stay late. So I have to vote for the second Thursday, not because I think it's better, but just because it personally conflicts in my calendar.
Perfect. What about Multnomah?
I think we could do either way. We can make it work. I think our biggest concern is trying to ensure that communication is as smooth as possible. So either way.
What was that, Molly?
What was the last comment?
Oh, sorry. I was saying either way, either option, date option is good. So let's just leave it there.
Perfect. Thank you. Washington?
We're pretty flexible too, but I think I would prefer to have it after the Hub directors meeting.
Directors, Lane County?
I could go either way too. Again, just want to reiterate that it's really, for me, the big concern around just the consistent flow of communication between ELD directors and managers.
Right.
So I don't have a preference.
Okay, Marion and Polk?
I actually appreciate I consider this time sort of an infomercial of what's coming on the Thursday call, of which I join when I can. So I kind of like having both because I think it gives a little bit of a preemptive thought time on what's coming forward. And I think given all of the changes that are happening, the more times we have the opportunity to hear and discuss, the better things will be as we transition.
Okay, Northwest?
I put it in the chat box, but it just works better for us to do it combined together. So for me to join on the second Thursday, I mean, if you maintain having this half hour after director's meeting, it's likely I won't be able to participate, so I just join on that second Thursday anyway, as I could.
Okay. And then South Central?
I'm available either. I liked Lisa's comment about the preview part. That's been really helpful, but I'm available either.
And then Southern Oregon.
Hi, this is Renee. I think it's a little frustrating to have two meetings. Typically, with the preschool promise section of this meeting, I ask Molly to join me, and when possible, I join that second Thursday call or debrief with her right after. There are so many questions that come up organically that I think consistency and making sure everybody is on the same page makes a lot of sense for us. I can do either day, but Molly and I try to be together when possible.
Yeah, so I think what we can do, it sounds like we'll need to work on it, because preschool promise will become a topic of conversation during the HUB director's call. So maybe I'll go ahead and work collaborative with Denise, so maybe just put it at the end or something. So, if we need to go ahead and stay a little bit longer, we will. And then just kind of have it standing. And then we can just go ahead and move everybody to just having that second Thursday of the month. So it's kind of still the same, but I know that in just talking to some of you, like, some are like, oh no, I forgot, or I didn't send that invite or something. So I know it feels kind of rushed sometimes, and I really do want to make sure that I'm being responsive to your questions and your needs. So I'll collaborate with Denise to go ahead and add a little bit, have a more stronger preschool promise segment during the HUB director's call, and then all will be invited to the second Thursday. And all of you guys are always invited. I'm just saying we're going to go ahead and be moving to have that call, and I'll work internally too to having maybe the first half of the hour very high level stuff, and that way on that second Thursday of the month. So if any of you need to just leave the call, then that's fine on that second Thursday. So we'll go ahead and do that. And Dorothy just had to hop off because she has another meeting coming up here. Okay, so real quick, we'll go ahead and talk about, we did send out a MailChimp last week talking about the PPI case studies that was sent out. It was an email that was sent out on behalf of Gwen, Beth Green, and Catherine. There were 4 different hubs selected by the PPI research team to go ahead and do some individual interviews with some of the providers and just getting some information on coaching and support. So just any questions on that email that was sent out? Okay, so pretty simple there. And then I wanted to go ahead and talk about our preschool promise quality standards. As you guys have heard from our other partners here, the ELDR program team has been super busy. We do have the preschool promise RFA, the fiscal agent RFA, the OPK RFA, along with the equity fund, right? Even though the equity fund is together by a different team, we're all working collaborative on all these different RFAs. So it was really busy. And at the same time, we're trying to go ahead and implement the different stakeholder engagement. So I was able to go ahead and put this at a glance stakeholder engagement for our preschool promise quality standards. So you'll be able to see there's going to be a session 1 for our preschool promise providers. That's going to be in English and in Spanish. Right now, we're still waiting to finalize the Spanish one because we're trying to work with translation. We need to have those standards translated before we can do the stakeholder engagement. And then we will be having a session 2 once we gather some more stakeholder engagements and feedbacks and thoughts on that. I think I had a question there. Okay. Denise is going to go ahead and help me check that box there. And then we'll be engaging with you. One thing that I did wanted to know is that stakeholder engagement session with providers was really focused on clarity of the actual standard. Does it make sense? How would you implement this? Then on this Thursday, we're going to be having an actual stakeholder engagement session with all of your preschool promise hubs, and really just focus on what are some of the resources that you think that ELD is going to need to be able to provide to providers for effective implementation of those standards. We know that you are the one providing a lot of the TA, so what are some of the resources that you know, some of the training, do the standards make sense? So we'll be sending out the standards tomorrow for you all to go ahead and just review them prior to our stakeholder engagement meeting on Thursday. There was a question that came up. You know, we did have in our intent is to go ahead and have as much transparency as possible. One of the things that came up is when we send out those standards to our providers, it did say, you know, do not distribute confidential information. This is an outward document, so we're trying to be super careful with this type of documents because they are still in very draft status. There's also through the SSA, OD, through the K, through 12 initiatives there's some mention about preschool standards that need to be developed. So we also didn't want, you know, some of those partners to go ahead and get confused with the preschool promise standards, being part of those ELD standards. So my apologies if that came across as we were trying to go ahead and keep things from our partners. That was not really the intent. It was really more, we were trying to go ahead and control the distribution of that document. With that vein, when you get that document tomorrow, please, you know, we have that trust with you to go ahead and just keep it within your network, and we look forward to having that dialogue on Thursday. We will be, and I mentioned this the previous calls and also individually with some of the hub directors, is that we are starting to do some stakeholder engagement with ASME. One of the things is, and Sarah already left, but ASME had reached out to our leadership. They wanted their providers to go ahead and have a face-to-face dialogue with the ELD and just talk about what they're seeing on any questions about the RFA or anything like that. So that has come up, and we'll continue engaging with them from now until June. We're going to be having monthly meetings with them, but it's really just to be of service to them, just like we are service to you with our individual hub calls and coordinator calls. They want to also be able to be engaging with the ELD. There was a question that has come up. Well, what happens if a provider brings up an issue or anything like that? Like I said, our intention is really there to be a listening ear and keep them updated, just like we are with all of you on the different RFA processes. In this case, it will be the quality standards. Some of the preschool promise ASME members receive the quality standards, so getting some feedback from them. If at any time anything is shared during those meetings that is of concern to anything specific, I mean, I feel very, very strong that we would just reach out to you and ask you. If anything comes up, but really it's just more of us keeping that channel of communication with ASME open and more of that, you know, maintaining that partnership. I know I'm going like really fast. Is there any questions? Oh, we have some questions.
There's one in the chat box about, are these PSP provider sessions purple box for current providers only?
Yes. They're for current providers only, and I do, yes, so those are for current providers. there has been talks about like, what about upcoming providers? And one of the opportunities that we have is that this preschool promise quality standards that have to be finalized by February. So we are working on a very tight and fast timeline, but please, I will be more happy to go ahead and add them here as other engagements, because we are looking to go ahead and engage with other partners, and also really trying to use some of the already ELD meetings that we already have, and engaging. So I'll give you an example, for example, that partnership for pre-kindergarten meeting, that's something that happens once a month. So we kind of use that as an opportunity to go ahead and talk to our partners. It shows you the different participants that were part of it, part of that meeting. So just kind of keeping that up to mind. We are looking to go ahead and have one for our recognized tribes across the state, and having individual ones. And then I just added like other engagements. So that's looking internally here, like, do we already have a meeting where we're meeting with the CCRNRs or TRI that we can engage them on this? So this is, I did wanted to just give you the actual ones that have been scheduled, and then also letting you guys know this may be other entities that may hear about the preschool promise quality standards that we may be engaging. Some of it is going to be like, what I will consider a true like engagement, like we're going to do on Thursday, like really getting some feedback. Some of these engagements may be just keeping people in the know of what's going on. So just, we'll go ahead and send this out to all of you to go ahead and have that. But please, like, if you know of any other groups or any other meetings that you think that we could go ahead and that we should be engaging, let us know. I think we have another question there.
Are all of these remote sessions or in person is one question.
Mm-hmm.
And then when will the standards be finalized? And then the other question is, are hubs considered providers or partners?
Well, you guys are preschool promise implementers of preschool promise. So I would say you guys are partners. And the only reason why I put you guys in the purple box is because you guys are like embedded in the true implementation of preschool promise right now. So this was more of like, cool, we're going to be getting information really for individuals that are working with preschool promise providers. But then with ASME, some of those are preschool promise providers. So thank you for bringing that up. I did mention, like I said, we're going to be finalizing this quality standards by February. The one thing that you all know with our previous implementation of preschool promise is that we had the operating guidelines, and it was a 19-page document. We're really looking forward that in this next wave of implementation, we're going to have a preschool promise manual. So what does that look like? It's going to have the standards. It's going to be some of those operating guidelines. So like, what is the reporting, some of that, fiscal information and grant guidance, as well as processes, which is one thing that in the previous, I can speak myself as a coordinator, you had to be developing a lot of these processes to go ahead and do implementation. So we're really looking forward to continue to collaborate with you and putting some more clarity on that, what are some of the processes that we need, as well as there will be some additional like forms and templates and stuff that our providers can use for effective implementation in resources. Like what could be some resources, like when we're talking about curriculum, like what are some of the resources where they can go. So we're really trying to expand that to become the preschool promise manual, of just that embodies everything. So didn't want it, I want to make sure that you guys are all aware of the different stakeholder engagement sessions that we have going on. And if any questions or there's other meetings that you feel that we should be a part of, please do let us know. But any last minute questions on our preschool promise quality standards?
Dana, this is Jillian. Is it possible to let the partners know, the stakeholders that came to the last meeting and received a letter saying do not share with anyone, that for transparency's sake, because it created a lot of dissonance and trust questions, is it possible to let them know that the hubs also will have, the draft of the standards?
Yes, definitely. So no, we'll go ahead and get that out. And one thing to go ahead and point out, so one, I work very collaborative with Andy Molnar from our program unit. So I'll go ahead and it's kind of the one that gets, everything scheduled and everything organized. And so I'll make sure that we send out another MailChimp to the Preschool Promise providers and partners and everyone know about this. And yep, and then Lisa, okay, and I think that's the only other question. So just keeping you all up to date, as you can imagine, this past 2 months have been really busy and we're trying to go ahead and maintain you, in communication as much as we can. I think as we move forward, that we hope that we can have more information that we can share. One thing that I did wanted to add about the RFA is, we're working, one thing is finalizing the RFA and the other is getting it out to communities across the state. So by all means, let me know if there's, it's like, hey, Dana, you make sure this group knows about it. I am always, I think you guys play a key role in letting individuals know across the state of the RFA. So please do share your feedback and suggestions with that as well. And then Lisa, yes, all of these meetings are remotely. And one of the reasons, some of the meetings are actually facilitated by our AUNS partners, which they're not here in Oregon, they're actually in Chicago. And then we're also working with a 3-hour difference there. So all of them are remotely, including the Spanish ones. Those will be remotely as well, but as you can see, the Spanish ones will be held in the evening from 6 to 8. Okay. Is there any last minute questions? I know we're coming to the end here.
This is Jillian again. Just wondering how Preschool Promise plays into, I just received an invitation from Oregon Housing and Community Services about building early convening, and there's a limited amount of seats, and so it talks about co-location of affordable housing and early childhood centers and how to leverage them, and it's including the early learning division, it's including early learning hubs, it's including housing partners, philanthropic, and I just wonder, is Preschool Promise going to be involved, or is this more generic for the early learning division?
That will be more generic for the early learning division. Yeah, that's not specific to us.
Thank you.
One thing that I did want to mention before you all leave is I know that there's also been specific questions that our current Preschool Promise providers have to you all. And so I will be working with Anthony. I know that we have like the regular RFA, which are like big questions, right? But I think there's also, with a strong relationship that each of you have with our current Preschool Promise providers, I do look forward to like how do we collaborate more and just, also making sure that the information goes through your channels first and just helping each other out. So I'll be working with Anthony and developing some sort of link where whenever you have like a question from a current Preschool Promise provider that it can come, because I'm assuming, well, Jillian may have a question in her hub. There may be other current Preschool Promise providers across the state. So more to come on that on Thursday. So we're looking forward to just kind of, encapsulating all of those questions and making sure that, well, first all of my message and all of our message is consistent across the state, but I know that as we continue through this transition, there's just going to be more questions from our current Preschool Promise providers that may or may not be related to the RFA. For example, like files. Like I had a question last week about files and just different items there. But already, well, I want to be respectful of your time. If anything else comes up, feel free to reach out to me, and then I look forward to talking to you on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care, bye.